Hello, everybody. The little sign said that we're live, so I'm going to assume that we're live. Welcome to this live stream, the one in which we're going to talk about the AWA argument essay, evaluating and improving that essay. Make sure I got everything going here. Hopefully you guys can see me, you can hear me. If that's the case, let me know up in the chat. But here we go. While you guys are coming in, I would love to just know a little bit about where you're joining us from. I always love that information, so if you want to share that with me, that would be great. It is always amazing to see the near and far places that our students join us from, and that's super awesome. So I'm really excited you're here. I would be really excited to know where you're coming from. I am going to tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Linnea. I am a content creator here at Magoosh, but I am also the instructor trainer. I've spent a lot of time in test prep over the years. So I've been at Magoosh for about 3 years. Prior to Magoosh, I was at many other different types of test prep organizations, and I've done a little bit of everything. I also am a consultant and writing coach for both undergraduate and graduate admissions, particularly those essays. I tend to love all things writing. When I'm not teaching, when I'm not working, I spend a lot of time traveling, or used to, trying to get back to that. Wish me luck. So what we're going to do while I dive into what's going on here, I'm going to go ahead and turn off the camera because I want to be able to focus on what I got going on in my slides. I want you guys to focus on the slides. And yeah, so we will, I'll be here. You just won't be able to see me. Okay, so here is how we're going to go through evaluating and improving the AWA argument essay. First things first, who is this class for? Well, really, it's for students of all abilities. Anyone can benefit from these techniques, but this class is specifically designed for students looking to increase their AWA scores to the 4 to 5 range. But of course, with all things test prep, there is a caveat. Writing a high-scoring essay requires advanced language writing skill, and advanced language writing skills tend to take longer to see improvement. So you want to practice writing as often as possible if you want to see a significant increase in your AWA scores. So our goals for the day, focusing on the argument essay, we're going to talk about how ETS evaluates an essay. We're going to talk about how I, or you, can evaluate your essays. We're going to talk about how you can identify areas for improvement in your essays, and then how you can actually improve those areas that you've identified for improvement in your essays. And this is how we're going to break it down. First, we're all going to read an example essay. So I have a link I'm going to share with you in a little bit. It'll take you to an essay, which you'll read through. And then after you read the essay, you will assign it a score. After you assign it a score, I will share the score I gave it and discuss why I chose to give it that score. Then we'll look at some specific parts of the essay, particularly why it got the score based on the nuts and bolts. And then we'll discuss if and why those parts have an opportunity for improvement. Before we dig into the essay, a little bit of context. We're going to talk about what ETS is looking for when it's scoring or grading your essays. So we're going to start by talking about how and why an essay receives a specific grade or score. ETS is evaluating the quality of the following 4 aspects of the essay. First up, they're looking at whether or not the essay is following the prompt directions, then the level of analysis or critical thinking demonstrated throughout the essay. Then they're looking at how the essay is organized, overall cohesion, coherence, flow of ideas, that sort of thing. And then they're also looking at language use, sentence structure, clarity, general lack of errors, anything along those lines. But here's the nice thing. We know what ETS expects, and it's important to study ETS's expectations. How do we know what ETS wants? Well, ETS tells us what they want or what they're looking for. ETS publishes descriptions of each score level, and the descriptions detail the expectations for each of the 4 categories within each and every one of the scoring levels, the ones we just discussed. So in your prep, you should spend some time reviewing the different score levels and the different breakdowns of those score levels so that you're familiar with what ETS is looking for and how they're going to evaluate your essay. That is available at the link you see at the bottom of the screen, and I'm also going to throw that up here into the chat so you guys have it. It's a good link to make sure you bookmark. Wait for it, wait for it. It's coming. I just gotta go get it and copy it. And final step, paste it. So hopefully you guys see that pop up. Don't dive into it right now. Definitely copy it and keep it as reference for later. It's something you want to dig into when you are looking at what's up with the AWA essay. But for now, having the link is good enough, and you really don't need it for us to dive right into our activity, which is we're going to check out the essay. So I'm going to give you guys about 5 minutes to read the essay at the link below. I'm also going to paste that link in the chat. And then after you read the essay, I'm going to ask you guys to give it a score on that 0 to 6 scale. So just remember, again, you might not be that familiar with the scoring breakdowns yet, and that's totally fine. Kind of think at a high level about those 4 different dimensions. We talked about whether or not it follows directions, the level of analysis, organization, and language. So I'm going to go ahead and share that with you guys right now so you have it. 1 second while I copy and paste this link. All right. Here you go. Let me know if that's not working for you, and I will try to get that sorted out. But ideally, everybody's checking out that link right now and reading through that essay. And then the next thing I'm going to do is ask y'all to assign it a score. We don't have to use the full 5 minutes, so if you are done reading the essay, go ahead and let me know in the chat that you're done reading the essay. We can wrap this up a little bit sooner if you all are finished and ready to score it. All right, about one more minute, and then we will come back together and talk about the score for that essay. All right. Hopefully you've had time to read through it. Think about the different elements that ETS is going to look at when they score it. And now I'd like to hear from you guys. So ETS scores on a 1 to 6 scale. What score did you give this essay? So if you had time to kind of think through that and assign it a score, I would love for you to throw that up into the chat. All right. So let's talk about the score that I gave this essay. I would say that this essay would land in the world of a 5. Maybe 4.5, but definitely 5-ish. And I want to tell you why I think this would get a score of a 5, or why I know this would get a score of a 5. So this is why I scored this essay a 5. A 5 indicates that the essay is strong, right? It's a strong essay, and according to what ETS tells us, in addressing the specific task directions, a 5 response presents a generally thoughtful, well-developed examination of the argument and conveys meaning clearly. And then it breaks it down and goes on to say, a typical response in the category of a 5 clearly identifies aspects of the argument relevant to the assigned task and examines them in a generally perceptive way, develops ideas clearly, organizes them logically, and connects them with appropriate transitions, offers generally thoughtful and thorough support for its main points, conveys ideas clearly and well using appropriate vocabulary and sentence variety, and finally demonstrates facility with the conventions of standard written English that may have minor errors. So a 5 is by no means going to be perfect. And that essay is not perfect, but it does a pretty solid job of ticking those boxes. All right. Right now, I'm going to pause and see if y'all have any questions. If you do, throw them up in the chat. I would love to clarify, clear up anything, any questions you have in general about the argument essay. No questions right now? That's fine. Feel free to ask me questions at any time. I'll see them pop up in the chat and I will try to get to them. All right. So let's talk about why, I don't know why they ended up at the bottom there, but we're going to break that down and talk about why I gave that essay a 5. So basically, the adherence to the specific task directions was on point. The level of analysis and critical thinking wasn't mind-blowing, but they did a very good job of finding relevant assumptions to attack and then explain why those assumptions were problematic. It was organized fairly well. Everything was placed into separate topic sentences, separate body paragraphs that were separated by clear topic sentences. There was use of transitions throughout. And then in terms of language use and sentence structure, there were a few errors, of course, but there was a variety of sentence structures. Most sentences clearly communicated a point. There were not many points throughout the essay in which I felt it lost focus. Of course, some things could have been a little bit more polished, but that's why this is a 5 and not a 6. We're going to look at each one of these separately. So the first one follows prompt directions. If you take a second, I'm not going to read these to you because that might not be very fun for you guys, but take a moment and just read through a 6, a 5, and a 4 in terms of follows prompt directions. And I'm giving the 6 and the 5 and the 4, and these come from ETS. I'm giving these specifically because no matter what, this is a higher scoring essay. So there's no reason to look at what a 3, a 2, and a 1 would break down to be, because 3, 2s, and 1s are all considered lower scoring essays because they are missing an essential element of a standard essay. 4, 5s, and 6s, they all have what these essays need. So they're not missing anything, and it's really just now a matter of the quality of what you get. So in terms of following the prompt directions, this is something that's really good to pay attention to when it comes time for you to write your own essay. If you look at the specific prompt and instructions, here they are again. The prompt is asking for a response to be written, and this is the italics at the bottom, in which you examine the stated or unstated assumptions of the argument. Be sure to explain how the argument depends on these assumptions and what the implications are for the argument if the assumptions prove unwarranted. So the big thing here is those assumptions. They're asking you to attack the assumptions in the directions, and that is something that you want to do when you write your essay. Those directions will change, so you want to pay attention to what they are asking you to address. This one is asking the writer to address assumptions. That's what anyone who encounters this type of direction task should do. Other times it might be something else, but that is something you definitely want to pay attention to, and it's a good idea to mirror whatever the language is. So what did the author do well here? Or is there anything they could have done to more closely follow the task directions? If you have an opinion about that, I'd love for you to share it up in chat, and then we'll kind of talk through how I felt they handled the task directions. All right, so if we just look at the introduction one more time, take a second and kind of read through what we have here from the introduction. We could look at each and every piece of the essay again. We really don't need to, because this introduction does a very good job of previewing what the author is going to do. And what I'd like to draw your attention to is here, it highlighted. 1, must weigh the potential profits against the risks and costs associated with this new venture. There are several, and there's the word, assumptions in the argument, including the demand for a club, the popularity of jazz music, the jazz talent, and the costs related to opening a jazz club. And then these assumptions must be examined. So already that's great, because it's mirroring or reflecting the language that were in the prompt directions. And then we already know, having read the essay, that this author goes on to pretty much discuss each and every one of those assumptions in its own separate body paragraph. So in terms of following the prompt directions and executing on the task, I absolutely think this gives a very strong 5 showing. Some people might even argue that this part of it would get a 6, but I think between a 5 and 6 would be reasonable here. All right, we're going to move on and talk about this essay in terms of critical thinking and analysis. So again, take a moment, read through what ETS has to say about what critical thinking and analysis looks like at those different scoring ranges. Okay, so again, I would love to hear from you guys. What do you think the author did well here? Is there anything that the author could have done to improve critical thinking or analysis? All right. So in terms of looking at critical thinking and analysis, we want to look at the assumptions that the author examined. And the first body paragraph was the residents of Monroe, do they actually want a jazz club in their town? That is an assumption the author attacks. Body paragraph 2, whether the popularity of the radio program and summer festival would be replicated at a live venue. The argument's making that assumption. Our writer is attacking that assumption. Body paragraph 3, will the well-known jazz musicians living in Monroe positively impact the jazz club? They're making all kinds of assumptions about the proximity of those well-known jazz musicians that the author of this essay calls into question. And then the last body paragraph, it's really where the conclusion would go, but it's more of a body paragraph, and that's the author attacking the assumption that the club will be profitable despite opening and ongoing costs. Will it actually make enough money? So for critical thinking and analysis, the fact that the author attacks these absolutely relevant assumptions and does a very good job of generally breaking them down and explaining why they're problematic and lead to a flawed argument, well, that is why for critical thinking and analysis, I would give this a 5, but you'll see that 4 is also kind of mildly highlighted, and that's because you could argue that there are some parts in here that are maybe extraneous or parts that aren't detailed all that well, so the support is a little bit uneven. I would say this is more of a 5, but the live human who scores these and the computer, the e-reader, that is your second scorer, they can be off by a point. So if someone gives you a 5 and someone gives you a 4, yep, that is completely fine. It would just be an average of those two. So I think it'd be okay to say this is maybe a 4.5. 4 seems a bit harsh, but if you gave it a 5, I think that's absolutely on point with the way that the information is, well, the information that the assumptions that the author chose to tear apart. And that brings us to organization. Take a second, read through the score ranges for organization. All right, so again, love to hear from you guys. What do you think the author did well in terms of organization, and is there anything that the author could have done to improve organization? All right, so if we look at organization together, again, we're going to go back to kind of a map of the ideas. So there was an introduction, it indicated the argument is flawed, and it previewed the unsupported assumptions that the author then attacked. And then first body paragraph, that was the residence body paragraph. Second body paragraph, that was the one about the popularity. Could it be recreated for the live venue? Third body paragraph, will those well-known jazz musicians have any kind of impact on a club? And then last body paragraph, not really a conclusion, right? It's kind of like this, it's kind of like, well, that's where a conclusion would go, but this person put just another body paragraph in, and that's honestly not a bad thing. The introductions and the conclusions in both the issue and the argument essays are the least important part of the essay. I mean, if it's there, great, but what they're really looking at is your ability to show why an argument is flawed and the ways in which that argument can be improved, and all of that's going to happen in the body paragraphs. Yep, absolutely, it's just missing that conclusion. Hello, person in chat, so happy to see you. All right, so if we look at one of the body paragraphs again, because remember, organization is not just at this higher level, although this person does a very good job of compartmentalizing everything, and all of those body paragraphs have a very solid topic sentence, and then details that support the topic sentence. But you can also check out one of the body paragraphs again and notice that the connective tissue is present. So this person does a very good job of transitioning. Starts off with first. We have although. We have to examine this argument in more detail, comma. There is a lot of variation on sentence structure that all flows well together. So there's definitely cohesion within the paragraphs. And then also the little words that signal whether or not a direction is changing or where you're going, and tell the reader, hold the reader's hand. Those little words are present as well. So for organization, at the paragraph level, as well as sort of the coherence of the entire essay, and at the cohesion level of sentences, this one definitely is 5. Some people could even argue that it might be a 6 or a 5.5. It's pretty on point, but there are some places where the transitions maybe aren't as clear as they possibly could be. And really, if we're talking about the difference between a 6 and a 6 is just an incredibly polished 5. It's levels of polishing. A 4, a 5, and a 6, they have all of the same elements. A 4 is sort of the basics. It has all the basic elements you need to write a satisfactory essay. And then a 5 takes those elements and makes them prettier. And a 6 takes those elements and makes them even prettier. So we're going to talk about that last one now, which is language. So take a look at the different scoring ranges and how they break down language. A 6 outstanding, a 5 strong, a 4 adequate. And then we're going to consider the essay again in terms of language use. All right, so what do you think the author did well in terms of language use? And then if you can go back into the essay, if you open up that link again and kind of skim through, what is one sentence you think could be improved? Feel free to copy and paste that up into the chat. Something that you're like, this one feels a little bit rushed. Of course, I'm very curious about what you might come up with, but then I have one at the ready to share as well that I think can be improved. So give you guys another like 30 seconds or so if you are going to open up that essay again and pick out your own sentence that you think could be improved. And then I'll share mine. All right. Here is a sentence that I definitely thought could be improved. Right now we've got, the potential jazz club would need to inquire about the musician's interest in making appearances at the club to quantify the potential gigs that the jazz club could offer potential patrons, which is quite a lot. That's a very long sentence. I would love to see you guys rework that sentence and rewrite the above, sharing your edits in the chat. How could you make that sentence better? Now, that's a good one. To examine this argument in more detail, survey the citizens on the road to understand if they're interested in opening a similar spot on the road. Nice. All right. So, in terms of editing this sentence, here is my fix. You know what it looks like before? Crazy long sentence, kind of wordy. And really, I just took that sentence and broke it up a little bit. Everything's still there. Potential jazz club owners should determine whether and how often the local jazz talent is willing to play at the club, with a nice comma to kind of break this up, which would help determine the number of live performances they could offer patrons. So in terms of language, this is where I'd say there are a few places in here that are a little shaky. I still think that it's a 5. I still think it conveys ideas clearly and well, using appropriate vocabulary and sentence variety. It demonstrates facility with the conventions of standard written English, but there are minor errors. But the key there is that there are minor errors. There are no errors in here that would create any confusion about meaning, and that's essential. The meaning's all very clear, so there's no errors that really would cause a reader to lose focus. But again, I also think that it would be justified if someone gave it a 4.5. Giving it a 4 would be a little bit harsh. But 4.55, I think, completely on point. Now, before we dig into what we just did here, what we did in terms of rewriting that sentence, that's part of evaluating and improving your own writing skills. Going through and identifying and rewriting outside of that time context when you're not writing an essay with that 30 minutes, but you're sitting and looking at the essay you wrote during that 30 minutes and then looking for ways that you can improve it. We'll talk about that in a second, but I just want to pause for questions that y'all might have about the AWA in general. Let you know that I'm still here. I'm still with you. Hi. I don't see any questions coming into the chat. If you think of some, you can ask me at any time. But if there are no questions, we can move on to the next portion of this. So as I go back to the slideshow, I'm going to turn off this camera because bandwidth. Ooh, there's a great question. How can I develop my writing skills? Well, that honestly comes through memorizing the template, because these are crazy formulaic essays. So the writing skills you need to write both the issue and the argument essay for the GRE, it's not as expansive as becoming like a fantastic writer who is writing research papers. It's really just, okay, what is the formula? How do I fill that in? And we're actually going to talk about that for the argument essay in just a moment. But no matter what, it still comes down to tons of practice. All right, so let us go and talk about that part, shall we? Here we go. Evaluate and improving your own essays. So we're going to take a closer look at the template for argument essay body paragraphs. And the reason why we're focusing on body paragraphs is because that is where the lion's share of your points is going to come from. Okay, that is important in terms of learning the template. The introduction, you basically just have to say like, hey, this argument's flawed for X, Y, and Z reasons. And the conclusion, it's not even that important you have one, but a conclusion is just like, and I'm done writing. What you really want to focus on is memorizing the template for the body paragraphs. In the body paragraph, your topic sentence should identify the flaw. Your second sentence should explain why it is in fact a flaw. Your third sentence should state what additional information we need to know for that to no longer be flawed. Fourth sentence, you provide hypothetical additional evidence that would strengthen the argument. Fifth sentence, provide hypothetical additional evidence that would weaken it. And then sixth is a recap, basically saying that without this additional evidence, we cannot assess the argument. Now, to get a 5, you absolutely do not have to have all 6 of these sentences in all of your body paragraphs. It's something to aim for, but it is not the gold standard. Right? So don't feel like every single body paragraph has to be this incredibly detailed. It doesn't. It helps if you have all of these elements, but you do not need to have each and every one of them present to get a 4 or 5, even a 6. So if we look at the way this breaks down, you've got, we'll call that pink, the first few sentences of your paragraph should be your topic sentences, introducing the flaw that you're going to examine. Then in green, the next sentence should explain why it's a flaw, right? Yellow, additional information. Red, hypothetical evidence that strengthens. Blue, hypothetical evidence that weakens. And then we'll call, I don't know, it's like a light black lavender, a shade of purple, and that's that last paragraph, or the last part of the paragraph where you just kind of wrap it up. Okay. Let's look at how you use this to become a better writer, to help develop your writing skills. So if you were the writer of the last essay, you would take a paragraph and you would diagram it out, and that is part of the evaluation process. So you'd look at it and you'd go, okay, well, what do I have here? I have a topic sentence. Another assumption that must be explored further is the popularity of jazz and Monroe. So I've established the topic, and then I have a very long discussion of the additional evidence. Then I jump to what really would work better as a conclusion. And I also included hypothetical information that would weaken, but I don't have a couple of elements. So once I've analyzed what I have, I would look back at, okay, well, let me match this up with the template. One more time, the template looks like this. So what's definitely missing? There is no additional information we need to know. There's nothing that indicates what would strengthen. And I would say that the second to last sentence and the last sentence should really switch places. So if that were my essay, I'd look at that body paragraph and I'd go, okay, here's some things that I missed. And I've got to get better at not missing those. So what's missing? And then to develop those skills and to start training myself to use this template each and every time, I would then need to rework the paragraph, which would improve it. And the more I rework my paragraphs, the more I improve them, the more I make them look like the template, then the more apt I am to, or the more likely I will be to remember each and every one of those elements on test day. So it's really just training the habit. So reworking a paragraph would look something like this. So this is taking this last paragraph that we were just looking at, the one that we would have evaluated. So we wrote an essay, and we went, okay, this was one of my body paragraphs. I know it's missing some things. I've identified what it's missing. and now I'm going to improve it and take the time to go through and write it out in the way that I would like it to look on test day. And that's what this would look like. Take a second, kind of read through that. If you're like, yo, that's crazy long. Yeah, that's definitely a little bit long. But remember, this would be in the reworking and improving part of this. So this is where you're not underneath any kind of time constraint and you're looking to train the template into your writing style for this particular essay. So don't feel like, oh, so this is what an improved paragraph looks like. This is quite a bit longer than you'd probably write for an argument essay, particularly because you only have about 30 minutes. But this is a good example of how you develop and improve in terms of following the template. So you'll notice that the second two sentences have been swapped. The second sentence has been shortened a little bit, and the third sentence has been included that wasn't there before, the additional information. To truly evaluate the argument, we need demographic information that provides greater detail about the radio show and festival audiences. So it sets up what's missing. Doing this kind of diagramming, evaluating, and improving will especially help you if you are trying to get to that 4 to 5 range. Because if you are not quite at a 4 yet, that means you are missing something fairly significant from the development of your essay. And going through and paying attention to the template and the elements that need to be present, that can help you incorporate those elements, which will hopefully move you into the range of a 4. Or if you're a 4, polishing them can move you to a 5, or if you're a 5, polishing them even further can move you into the range of a 6, although it's very difficult to get a perfect score on these essays. People get close. There's a lot more 5.5s out in the world than you might realize, or that you might imagine. So evaluating and improving takes what you originally had, which you wrote in practice, walks you through the elements that are part of the template that you're striving for. Again, you don't have to have every single one of these to get a 4. Well, you definitely don't have to have every single one of these to get a 5, and absolutely you don't have to have every one of these to get a 4. But in terms of just improving and developing, paying attention to what's missing here will help you become a stronger writer for this type of essay in general. And then when you rework it, you end up with something a little bit more like this. If you're thinking like, well, I can't reproduce that when I'm timed on test day, totally makes sense. And you probably won't. It would most likely be shorter. But again, this is just helping you identify what's missing from your writing and helping you train that muscle so that hopefully you just follow through with the formula when it is in that time context. All right, let's talk about what we learned today. We went through, well, we got a better idea of how to evaluate an essay. We talked about how ETS is going to evaluate our essays, which in turn helps us evaluate an essay. We also learned how to identify areas of improvement in our own essay by comparing to a template and recognizing what we don't have, and then how to improve those areas to write a better essay by taking the time and writing in the elements that we forgot or need to start practicing more to incorporate. So what I'd like to do now is invite y'all to ask any final questions. Anything AWA related, anything related to the argument essay, anything that I can clarify, happy to do so. I also want to tell you guys that we are right now offering kind of a sweet deal, 30% off the GRE and admissions bundle. Code GRE Bundle 30 will give you access to that, and then also 20% off of all of our other plans. So if you are interested in joining Magoosh for your test prep journey, now's a pretty good time to do that. Okay, so now that the slideshow is over, I can come back on camera. Hey everybody. Question is, how often would you suggest that one practices essay writing? Well, that is a great question, because that completely depends on how important the essay is to your application. So that is something you absolutely want to find out. How do the programs you are applying to use the essay? Do they care about the essay at all? Because some programs definitely do not. So for most programs, quite honestly, it can vary quite a bit, but most programs are really just looking for the ability to show that you can write what they would consider a passing essay, which is an essay that gets a 4. Because, right, that essay has all the fundamental elements an essay needs. So most programs that care about the essay are really only looking for that. There are some programs out there that might ask for a higher score. I ran across a student a while ago who was applying to a philosophy program, and they said that they had to get 5s or above on the essay. That's pretty rare, but these are all the things that you want to know by researching these programs, in particular looking at how important the essay is to them, or the essays are. Because again, if they aren't that concerned about your GRE AWA scores, then you want to deprioritize them as well. No matter what, it's pretty much a good idea to spend the most of your time focused on your quant and verbal score. Those scores are going to matter more for most programs, but every program is a little bit different, so make sure that you check. But for the most part, it's not probably going to matter as much as either the quant or verbal score. So once you figure out how important the essay is, then you can kind of have a timeline. It also depends on how much you feel like you need to improve. So if you really feel like you aren't in the 4 range and it might take you a while to get there, you might write an essay a week or every 2 weeks, depending on the timeline between now and when you take the test. If you're feeling pretty solid that you could write a 4, maybe you only write the essays when you're taking a full practice test. It really depends on your individual goals, where you're and how confident you're feeling with the essay at the moment. Does that make sense? Hopefully that answers that question. I wish that these questions had just sort of like a universal truth I could share, but they really don't, because so many of these questions the answers change depending on the different programs people are applying to. Other questions that I can answer for y'all. You are very welcome for that. Thank you for asking the question. Yeah, biggest thing I'd say is dig into the program details, see how important the essay is actually going to be. Typically the least important part, but that's not always true. All right, everybody, I'll hang out here for maybe another minute or so. Thank you all so much for joining. Stay tuned, because we're going to have a few more of these live streams coming up, covering a range of different subjects. So would love to see you all come back for those opportunities. And no matter where you're at in the process, I hope that it's going pretty smoothly, and I wish you the best of luck. All right, last minute. I don't see any more questions, and I'll go ahead and sign off for now. You're very welcome. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day as well, wherever you happen to be at. You might be at the beginning or end of your day. I'm kind of in the middle here in Northern California. All right, everybody. I don't see any other questions coming in. So, to all of you who joined, thank you so much again. Keep your eyes peeled for other live stream opportunities. And remember, we are having that sale right now if you are interested in using Magoosh as part of your test prep journey. Okie dokie. Take care, everybody. Bye bye for now.